moving through my February TBR, I'm not sure that I'm having as successful of a reading month as I did in January, but who's counting? I wanted to talk about a couple of the books that I just finished recently. First, I finally read Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaghy. I definitely see why this book is so beloved. I loved how the stark writing style really matched some of the existential cynicism that I felt from Rowan's character. And especially as we uncover the layers of her story and begin to see the perspective of Dom and his family as opposed to her and why she's on the island of Sheerwater. I felt like McConaughey kind of played with our assumptions of what was going to happen in this book. You know, the interior dust jacket gives us some dramatic details. And I went into this book kind of assuming that I already knew who the perpetrator of many of those details were, only to be proven very, very wrong. And I love when authors do that in a way that makes sense. Like, we learn to trust characters that I wasn't really sure that we were supposed to be trusting. I thought the characterization was really decent. I found it interesting that the children all told their chapters from the third person perspective as opposed to first person, like we got with Dom and Rowan. So that was an interesting narrative detail. This book sent me down a deep dive into even the history of Antarctica, the background of the whaling and sealing industry, and sort of the horrific atrocities that were committed against these animals for their oil, for the oil from their blubber and fat, just to produce machine oil. I really loved that one of the through lines was how innocence that is exemplified in the animals that are on Sheerwater, innocence is the cost or the sacrifice put on the altar of human advancement, and even the presence of humans on this island of Sheerwater. They're there for scientific exploration and discovery, which, again, in itself is not inherently evil or bad, but there's something about humans being where they're not supposed to be, or maybe opening up Pandora's boxes that they're not supposed to be opening, that really reveals our dark side. I loved that relationship between fire and ice and death and life, as told through Rowan's perspective of losing her house in Australia in the bushfires. Her sense of place in the past with her house that she built, and the sense of place now in an island that's largely abandoned, in a home that isn't hers. And yet she learns to really open up her heart to true grounding love. I love that this book did not hit us over the head with romantic love, but really established her care of the children first. And then it moved into a deeper expression between her and Dom, and really allowing her character and his, honestly, to relearn how to love. This is for sure going to be one of my top 10 of the year, I would say. I think I can safely predict that. I tend to read murder mysteries in the winter, and so I am reading through the Agatha Christie Poirot novels. This is the first one, The Mysterious Affair at Styles. These are great for when you need a really straightforward formulaic novel. Now, I have just, like, I think I'm going to need this throughout the month of February because I'm reading a few heavy novels, which I will get to in a moment, but these are so good because it gives your brain a little bit of a puzzle to try to figure out, but you know, at the end, the detective, Hercule Poirot, is going to be the only person who remotely understands how to put the clues together. So I finished this first one earlier this month, and now I'm moving to the second one, which is The Murder on the Links. One of the reasons why I gravitated towards this series is because I really loved the new covers. I loved that sort of like mid-century. I love a good cover. I started this one last night. It's called Briefly A Delicious Life by Nell Stevens. This is Apparently, there's a ghost theme for me this month. That's unusual. This is about a 14-year-old ghost who is observing the love affair between Frederick Chopin and George Sand. I really liked that this was part ghost story, part historical fiction, lit fic. It had a lot of little details that I found really compelling. I didn't initially have this book on my February TBR, but I'm really excited to get into it. And then the big hitter for me this month is that I am going to be reading Beloved by Toni Morrison. I read The Bluest Eye last year and absolutely fell in love with it, fell in love with her writing. Beloved is one of her most treasured novels, and I'm really looking forward to diving into it. I started it yesterday, and I am currently 20 pages in, and there's already so much to stop and really sit with. Additionally, someone on TikTok recommended that I do an immersive read with this, which means that I'm reading the book alongside the audiobook at the same time. And I went to audiobooks.com and I downloaded the audiobook where Toni Morrison herself reads the novel. Beloved is a very stark look at the incredibly long reaching impacts of slavery, especially for people who are not currently enslaved when the novel begins. And these walks down memory lane that the characters are kind of going through in this novel are observed with this, I don't want to say detachment, but the way that they are able to look back on their past is very interesting. It's something that I'm thinking about as I'm reading of that. The legacy of enslavement, the legacy of this slave economy that our country was fueled by. Setha, the main character, she is literally haunted by the ghost of her dead child. It is a physical presence in their house, which I wasn't expecting. Like, I knew that going in, but I thought it was like haunted in the sense of just memories that wouldn't leave her alone. But no, the child is literally haunting her house. So that is giving it a really interesting storytelling element. There's a lot of symbolism in this book. I personally love a book that gives me something to really sink my teeth into. I am going to read a little bit more of Beloved today. I have my reading notebook that I have been utilizing for taking notes, and I already have so much annotated for this book. Let's get cozy. Let's get comfy. I'm going to do some more reading. I've got my audiobook ready to go for Beloved. So let's get to it. I am now 30% of the way through. I wanted to do a little reading update, just kind of putting into words what I'm reading. When I read a book that's really in depth, I've been highlighting notes of just like character details and symbols that I think I'm going to want to go back and do a little bit more reading on. So far in the book, we have been walking down memory lane with Setha and another character whose name is Paul D. The novel begins after Setha and her daughter Denver have escaped active enslavement. So they have escaped from the plantation of Sweet Home and they are now living in a home with her mother-in-law, whose name is Baby Suggs, and her daughter Denver. Her two other children, Howard and Bugler, have run away. Her husband's name is Hallie. I don't think we know what has happened to him yet. And then Setha is confronted with a person from her past on the sweet home plantation that she ran away from. This man's name is Paul D. With his presence now in her life, she is really confronted with a lot of events and people and memories from her past, and the first several chapters is really memory driven. So we are really being pulled back into the days of enslavement for both Paul D and Setha. And I love how beautifully Toni Morrison weaves their shared memories through the novel. Now, Paul D will remember one aspect of a memory, and of course, Setha, being a different individual, experiencing a different side of that, will have a completely different or complementary angle of that memory. I'm really, really catching on to and loving how memory, or rememory, as Toni Morrison states in this novel, is a major driver of the narrative. I'm really interested at how she is weaving this paranormal element, to use modern narrative terms, I guess, this paranormal element of Setha's daughter haunting the house, and how her other daughter, who is living, Denver seems to perceive an embodied form of this ghost that Setha has not quite experienced. And so that's interesting. I'm really going to be paying attention to how differently Setha and Denver experience and perceive the ghost of Beloved. One of the major plot points of this novel, of course, is Setha being physically freed of enslavement, but very much enslaved to the memory of her dead child, Beloved. So a sense of place is really being used as a vehicle for memory in Beloved. And she says that some things go, pass on, some things just stay. I used to think it was my rememory. You know, some things you forget, other things you never do. But it's not. Places. Places are still there. If a house burns down, it's gone, but the place, the picture of it, stays. And not just in my rememory, but out there in the world. And if you go there and stand in the place where it was, it will happen again. And of course, she's talking about how the sense of place triggers the physical memory in your brain, and it will be there for you waiting. So, Denver, you can never go there, because even though it's all over and done with, it's going to always be there waiting for you. And that's how come I had to get all my children out, no matter what. And then Denver very astutely says, if it's still there waiting, that must mean that nothing ever dies. Setha looks right in Denver's face. Nothing ever does. And I wrote that because the place of their enslavement is still there, Setha, and by extension Denver, struggle to feel a true sense of belonging and freedom in their current existence. This is reinforced throughout the plot as Setha and Paul D again go back and forth with their memories of each other in the past, and how to reconcile that with their relationship with each other in the present. And so in the first, even just 30%, we have so many relational details. We have so much thematically happening. I really am intrigued by this sense of place that Toni Morrison is really using to expand these themes and character details, and I'm really enjoying the reading process so far. It is a dark book, absolutely, but racism in our society that comes from our past history of enslavement, slavery, the slave trade, building our economy off of the backs of human commodities as they were defined at the time. And she uses crops to kind of give us this push-pull relationship, like the image of the corn at the end of a few chapters ago, how everything in the life of an enslaved person was this jailed up experience. That is the word she uses to describe, and she's juxtaposing their experiences being treated as a commodity and not a human being, with the experience of this corn crop. I wrote down in the margins is that corn equates to the enslaved who could just as easily be plucked from the stalk and sold or used. And this horrifically clear image at the end of page 32, 33 in my version. The corn becomes this symbol of their defiant quest to experience joy, intimacy, and humanity in a context that is controlled amongst society which devalues them, and how both corn and slave were viewed as and used as a commodity by white slave owners. Okay, at this point I've said way too much about the book. It's just one I could sit here and talk about for a very long time. I I'm gonna go switch gears. I need to begin deep cleaning my house. I have my in-laws and my mom coming over for a Valentine's Day brunch this weekend. I gotta get the space prepared. That is all I'm gonna say about that. Today, I also want to head to Michael's because one of the big endeavors that I have set out for myself this year is that I really want to learn how to knit. I'm really trying to give my hands something to do in the evening that isn't picking up my phone. There's this huge resurgence happening right now of living an analog life, which, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge sucker for a lifestyle trend, but I really I want to do it in a way that is really intentional. I'm finding, especially right now, that this constant draw to a screen is it's making me very jumpy and anxious, and with everything that's just happening in our country right now, happening in the world, I need to give myself permission to do something that is useful, that's developing a skill. There is something that I'm looking to reclaim. And now that I'm in my mid 30s, I have a family, I'm looking to that next phase of my life and realizing that I want it to contain less just social media doom scrolling, TikTok doom scrolling. Yeah, this is just something I know I'm not alone in feeling these things. I'm loving that as a society we are questioning how much of our lives are spent on screens, and I'm excited to see what kind of change comes from that. But in the meantime, I want to sort of wean myself off from the crazy amounts of screens that I personally have found myself reaching for. I've been following this particular channel just to get myself started, and she just recommends like getting really cheap yarn to kind of start with, so that's what I'm going to do. And guys, I'm a perfectionist internally. I feel like if I can't do something right the first time, I just like throw it out of my head. I'm not going to do it at all if I can't do it perfectly. And we are leaving that behind in 2025. So I'm gonna just go acquire the necessary tools and have fun with it, and I'm gonna take you along on that journey.
To be on top, okay? Left hand is on top of the right hand. Include step-by-step instructions and downloadable this. Now with this loop that's around the needle, and then just drop everything.
We have done the after school pickup situation. We are settled. I, of course, afternoon cup of coffee. I wanted to just show you quickly what I got from Michael's. So let's do a quick little haul. I have been following the creator Sheep and Stitch in my knitting journey. I keep seeing her as sort of the creator to get your feet wet, jump into knitting. They have very clear, concise tutorials, and so that is who I'm kind of working from in these early stages. She recommended 9 to 10 millimeter bamboo needles, so I got these from Michael's. This is the brand Takumi, Clover Takumi. And then loops and threads was what she recommended for just like a cheap acrylic or acrylic blend, just to get your feet wet. These were like $4. So I got two just to give myself a variety of colors. One is like a green, the other is like a grayish mauve blend. I don't know, these colors spoke to me, so that is what I ran with. And then because I'm an avid junk journaler, I am always in need of adhesive, of glue, and so I got this glue runner, and I am really looking forward to doing some junk journaling today. I typically use an Elmer's glue stick, but sometimes the glue sticks do not, I don't know, they just don't adhere the way I really would like them to. Glue sticks are great when you're working with like pieces of paper, but for anything thicker like a card or a ticket. In some of my Germany pages from last year, we went to these German beer halls and they give you the coasters, and like I'm really having a hard time adhering those to the page and having them stick. So I'm hoping I can go back in with this adhesive glue runner and just kind of fix some of those pages that really need extra help. I feel like I should do a junk journal tour at some point. I don't really make videos about it, but it is something that I really love to do with my free time. And because, again, I am a parent, it's one of those activities that I can incorporate into like one-on-one time with my daughter really well, because she loves cutting and pasting and creating little, personal spreads. And like that's the fun of junk journaling. Just like taking what you have and creating something new with it. We're getting that quality time and she's making something. It's a very low energy activity that I have found is really easy to incorporate into our family lifestyle. I am on my way to go see Wuthering Heights with a friend. I'm admittedly very nervous about how this movie is going to be. Obviously, there's been a ton of chatter about how faithful of an interpretation it's going to be. I personally am going to see this movie with absolutely no affiliation to the book itself, to be honest with you. Its own media entity entirely. I have a very simple outfit today. I've got like a boxy tee, my heeled boots. I'm going with a little bit of a like a necktie today. I'm going to wear my trench coat because you guys, it is 50 degrees outside in the Midwest in February. These are the snacks that I've decided to take, like a random chicken protein bar, these balanced breaks. We gotta have chocolate when we go to the movies. I don't know, is that just me? I prefer to snack on chocolate. And then I love these. They're the Harvest Snaps. They have different flavors. The Caesar was on sale, so I decided to grab it, but I actually like ranch better. And then last but not least, we need a bev, so we're gonna go with a cream soda Olipop. All right, I literally just got back from the movie and I wanted to get my thoughts fresh. So, there's good and bad things about this movie. Was I bored at any moment of the film? No, I was not. So, just to preface, I wasn't going into this movie thinking that it was going to be a faithful reinterpretation of the book. It was just kind of, let's just go see what she did with it. And while I did not like the plot or pacing or the characterization as portrayed in these movies, like there really wasn't much grounding the movie. It just felt like it was sweeping from scene to scene, and that kind of got distracting after a while. But I will say, where I think this movie did succeed is in sort of the supporting roles of the film. The actors and actresses in some of the secondary roles, like Edgar Linton, Isabella Linton, the household staff, Nellie, phenomenal actors and actresses. The actors that played young Heathcliff and young Kathy were excellent. All of their acting felt more indicative of your traditional period piece or literature reimagining. Heathcliff and Kathy, this was a very over the top, borderline camp, which very much felt at odds with, again, some of the secondary portrayals around them. However, this movie had incredible set design, so surreal, very over the top. I personally loved the costuming, particularly for Margot Robbie, even for Isabella Linton. I definitely felt like there was a lot of storytelling happening in the costumes of the various characters. However, overall, as someone who really does love Emily Bronte, who does love Wuthering Heights, and was hoping for more of a faithful reimagining, I really did not love this movie in that aspect. It's not one that I will buy. I certainly will not watch it again. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that people go see it. I really was missing that element to sink my teeth into and really ground the story in something stable. We are off to do groceries now. I have to figure out what I want to eat this week because I'm not sure. So I'm going to go hop on Pinterest really quick and make a list for the grocery store.